Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 52 of D.A.R.C, or Does Anyone Really Care? The review series for Gran Turismo's underappreciated or just generally easily overlooked vehicles. But not just cars that are overlooked, it has to be cars which are overlooked but worthy of being used. And in this particular episode, we're moving away from the ultra-high performance D.A.R.C models such as in the last model, the DeLorean, which is an extremely quick car for its power, and we're moving into slightly more underwhelming territory. Now, that said, low PP racing is by definition not going to be as face-rippingly rapid as high performance racing. Of course, it can't be. But there is a surprising amount of competitiveness between low PP cars and low PP drivers. It's a very competitive category. Anything from say 450 or lower, you can get some seriously good races going with cars like that. 450, 425, 400 or even lower can be seriously fun. They're not the fastest of cars, but they make for fantastic racing vehicles in their own little category. Now this car is perfect for that category. Anything from 450 pp or lower, and the car is the Citröen Xsara. Now there's a rally version of this car on the game, and it's one of my favourite rally cars in the game. It's, as far as I can remember, the only front-wheel drive rally car currently featured on Gran Turismo, if my memory serves me correctly, the Citröen Xsara rally car. Also one of the cheapest at 150,000 credits. This model is, of course, the regular, if you will, street version. So it's obviously not going to live up to the rally version because it's a fairly mainstream model, but can it at least capture some of the spirit of the rally car, being that even the rally version retains the front-wheel drive. So you'd expect there to be some similarities between the performance and especially the handling of the cars. Obviously the rally version has a wider track and more power, but you should feel some of that DNA, hopefully, in the road version, especially a slightly sportier one as this one is. Well, I'm happy to say you kind of can. Now, it doesn't feel like a rally car by any means, but it's a pretty underappreciated, but at the same time genuinely effective car for lower PP racing. It's powered by a 1.6 litre engine, it's front-wheel drive, as we already mentioned, and there is one thing in particular that I have to say holds this car back. It's naturally aspirated. Now, you can understand that, but usually with these lower end cars they do let us turbocharge them, or at least supercharge them. In the case of this car, you can't, and that's a real shame because the engine has so much more potential. And the reason why I say that is because despite the fact that it doesn't have a turbo or a supercharger to help it, that 1.6 litre unit still puts out 243 horsepower. That's pretty decent. It also puts out 213 foot-pounds of torque, which is also pretty high for a 1.6. Combine that with the fact that it has a front-wheel drive chassis, as we said, which is pretty naturally inclined towards being highly manoeuvrable and having good handling, with the fact that it's also pretty light. I would say a little bit lighter than it looks, in fact, at 993 kilos. Less than 1 tonne of weight means that even though it doesn't have the most power, it does still put out 245 horsepower per tonne, which isn't bad at all, especially not for such a low PP. Now, as far as its PP, I mentioned racing at 450 or lower. Incidentally, its maximum PP level when tuned is 454. So it sits quite nicely, I would say. That's quite a lot of power for that PP level, and you can quite easily detune it down to 450 or even lower, and this car does actually have a high amount of power. If you compare that, for instance, to something like an Integra Type R, the Integra has that amount of power at the 475 pp level. And both cars are front-wheel drive, both cars have relatively small capacity engines and are relatively compact vehicles. Now obviously the Integra is more of a pure performance machine than this is, but still it's an interesting comparison to see how much power this car is allowed to have at that lower PP level, and that's a pretty cool thing. Now, even though it is light, it's not ultra light. You can certainly get vehicles that are lighter at that PP level, stuff like K cars. but 993 kilos, even if you are the heaviest in the lobby, still isn't that much. So its performance is decent, to say the least, for 243 horsepower. It can perform as well as, say, a hot hatch. Not, say, a 500 horsepower hot hatch, of course, but an average, maybe a slightly smaller hot hatch, something like a Golf GTI, Mark IV, Mark V, the Polo GTI to some degree. And at the 450 pp level, that's exactly the kind of performance you need to have. Roughly hot hatch level. The fact also that it's a coupe, and that it's relatively low slung in its body style and a little bit wider than your average hot hatch means that it handles itself pretty well around corners. It's no Formula 1 car, of course, but for a car that isn't designed for extreme performance, it handles itself very well. The handling is very good, the front-wheel drive chassis is very easy to tune, very responsive to tuning, and it's brilliant for being beginner friendly. It's very easy to use, very easy to drive, and very easy to race. And the fact that it only costs just under 22,000 credits means that for low PP racing, there are actually very few cars which can have more power than this at those low PP levels. There may be some that have more. I'm not saying it's the best by any means, but it's at least good to know that this is an option for you if you're a fan of low PP racing and you're looking for something which is certainly a sleeper, but also not an obvious choice and not a car that everyone uses. But that's it overall for this episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.